George Lucas, the accidental emperor of Hollywood, and how he lost it all. The man, the myth, the billionaire nerd who accidentally created the most powerful film franchise of all time, and then spent the next 40 years slowly ruining it. He was supposed to be one of the movie brats, the scrappy young directors who wanted to make art in the 70s. Instead, he turned Hollywood into a theme park, sold his soul to the toy industry, and then rage quit filmmaking after a bunch of nerds yelled at him online. A long time ago, George Lucas was just a film school nerd with a dream to make weird experimental sci-fi films that nobody would understand. His first movie, THX 1138, which came out in 1971, was a bleak dystopian film where people had no hair, no emotions, and no chance of survival. Audiences saw it and said no thanks. So Lucas did what all great artists do when their art flops. He sold out immediately. Rumor is that Francis Ford Coppola egged him on a bit and said, just make a comedy. Try to make a comedy. So in 1973 he made American Graffiti, which was a nostalgic coming-of-age movie about teens, cars, and people who do nothing. And it was a massive hit, and studios suddenly loved him. I saw it once, and I don't remember a thing. And so with Hollywood finally listening, George Lucas pitched his dream project. And Hollywood hated it. They thought it was stupid nonsense. The actors had no idea what they were saying. The original cut was a disaster, so much so that his friends begged him to quit filmmaking. In fact, one of his friends, Brian De Palma, it was his idea for them to have an opening crawl in Star Wars because he said nobody's going to have any clue what's going on. Anyways, George re-edited the film, threw in some John Williams music, and somehow, against all logic, Star Wars became the biggest thing in the history of cinema. And just like that, George Lucas became a god, accidentally. With the first Star Wars, he redefined Hollywood. With The Empire Strikes Back, he proved it wasn't a fluke. With Return of the Jedi, he introduced the Ewoks and started to get a little weird. By the 80s, Lucas was tired of directing. It was hard, it took effort. It required talking to actors, which he hated. So instead of making movies, he did the next best thing. He started selling toys. Lucas brilliantly or luckily kept the merchandising rights to Star Wars. And soon, Star Wars wasn't just a film series. It was a full-blown capitalist religion. And George Lucas, he wasn't a filmmaker anymore. He was a brand. And brands don't make art, they make money. He still did some writing and producing. He did Indiana Jones and Willow and Howard the Duck. But then in the 90s, he decided to direct again. In the 90s, CGI was the hot new thing, and George Lucas also had a company called Industrial Light and Magic. And so, sitting on his massive pile of money, he had an idea. What if I made 3 more Star Wars movies? George Lucas directed the prequels exactly as he wanted to. It turns out Lucas was never a great director. He was a great world builder, a great idea guy, but isn't everybody? Few of the concepts of the original trilogy were his own, and now, when left alone, with no one to tell him, "George, please stop," he made movies that felt like PowerPoint presentations starring CGI mannequins. Regardless of how you feel about the prequels, I personally liked them. Star Wars was still making money. Until one day, George had had enough, and in 2012 he quit. Sick of all the fan backlash, George Lucas did the most capitalist thing imaginable. He sold Star Wars to Disney for $4 billion. That's right, the nerd who fought against the Hollywood system sold his life's work to the biggest media empire on Earth, Empire. And then he got mad when they didn't use his ideas for the sequels. And then, of course, Disney proceeded to utterly destroy everything good about Star Wars. I think it was either Francis Ford Coppola or Brian De Palma who said that making Star Wars was the worst thing that ever happened to George Lucas, because before then he was making experimental artistic films. After selling the Star Wars brand, he said he was going to go back to making artistic experimental films. I don't think he did, or if he did, he didn't release them. He seemingly doesn't make movies anymore, which I don't really blame him for, considering that he's like 80. He just hangs out in his mansion, gives occasional interviews about how he's not totally bitter about Star Wars, and plays with his $4 billion of cash.